I feel like I should almost preface today's video with a massive warning sign to let you guys know to be ready. This one is an absolute crazy session. I don't want to give away too much. Let's hop right into it. We're playing once again at that wonderful private game here down in the desert with some desert friends. We're into this game for $5,800. Massive. We're playing 10, 25, 50. It gets cranked up to 25, 50, 100 later on in the session, so buckle up. In this very first hand, I have queen nine of spades here after a limp from the cutoff. I decide to make an isolation raise to $100 from the button. The limper calls and we're going heads up to a flop that comes 8-5-4 rainbow. With the action on me, I don't want to start bluffing at a board that doesn't really hit me too often, so I decided to check it through. And the turn card comes in 9 and improving me to top pair. Obviously 6-7 was a straight on the flop, so it doesn't change too much here on the turn. Our opponent decides to lead here. I pretty much expected this, as again this is a board texture that doesn't favor me all that much, but for that price, $125, somewhere around half pot, I'm never folding. I make the call and we're going off to a river card that comes a 10 of hearts. Unfortunate now because some hands that our opponent could have been value betting now improve to 2 pair. Don't see myself folding to very many bets, specifically not any that are constructed at the $275 price point. I'm just way too much of a station to hop off this train today. So I decide to make the call here pretty quickly, and we get the lovely words in poker: "You're good." We're going to go ahead and take that first pot down, like the way we played it, but at the end of the day, I'm sure we did something wrong. In this next hand, middle position makes it $75 to go. Middle position calls as well. The button calls. And I'm here in the small blind, and we look down at pocket nines. I decided to just call here. I think this is the worst option. I think, honestly, folding's not the worst thing ever, but calling is not that great either. I think we definitely cap our range here significantly by just calling here pre-flop. We're going off to a flop that comes 6-4-3 heart club. The initial raiser decides to c-bet here for $200, which is a little bit on the chunkier side. I decide to make the call here, and the turn card comes a deuce of diamonds. At this point, our opponent decides to check it through once I check it over to him, which is a great sign for me. I'm pretty confident I have the best hand, even though there is 4 cards to a straight. And the river card comes a jack of clubs. Not the best thing in the world, but the last thing I want to do is check and allow my opponent to bet a bigger sizing. I want to throw out a beautiful little blocker bet. I make it $25. Again, my goal here is to get our opponent to just call with obviously better hands or even worse hands sometimes. Our opponent ends up making the fold, so blocker bet maybe worked, maybe it didn't. Either way, happy to take it down. In this following hand, the $40 or the $50 straddle is on. And at this point, the button doesn't realize that the straddle's on and throws out some chips. And after a little bit, we let it go. It's the flea. We love the flea. We give him the opportunity to just limp it up here. I don't know what the hell he was trying to do otherwise, but a limp is fine. The small blind limps as well, and I find myself in that straddle. And I look down at ace-queen offsuit. This is a great opportunity for us to squeeze it up here. So I decided to make it $250, going a little bit on the meteor side. The flea's a tricky opponent. He's in position, and the last thing I want to do is allow him to get into this pot for a good price. I've got to lay him some bad odds. He decides to make the call. The other limper calls as well. We're going 3 ways off to a flop here that comes ace-jack-7 rainbow. Great board texture for us. The action on me, I don't think I need to go massive here. I like betting really small, somewhere like 20-25% makes sense to me. I bet $175. The flea is the only gentleman here that makes the call. And we're going off to a turn card that comes at 10 of spades.
That means you only have 1 pair. I'm good.
If you're nice, I'll be nice.
The flea's really good at table talk. I can't give him full credit for just having the nuts here. So I decide to once again bet for value. Considering I do have a queen in my hand, I do block king-queen. So again, I think I can still get called by inferior aces as well as some non-believing king jacks. So I make it $350 to go for value, and our opponent makes the call. We're going on to a river card that comes the 8 of clubs. I think at this point the jig is up for the both of us. I decide at this specific juncture to just check it over to him. He checks it back. He shows ace-10 here. So good hand to you, Mr. Flea, and you're going to take that pot down. We are continuing along with today's session. When early position limps, the cutoff makes it $125 to go. I find myself in the small blind with ace-8 of diamonds here. I think although there is an isolation in a game like this, I think I can treat it as just an open raise. I just call here. The big blind calls, the limper calls. We're going way too many ways to this flop. That comes king 8-6 rainbow. Action ends up checking through here, which is pretty good for us, and the turn card comes a 10 of hearts. Once again, the action checks through, so I'm feeling kind of oddly comfortable with my holding, even though it's like third pair on this board. even better when the river card comes a 10 of spades pairing that middle card. I'm happy with my hand and happy enough to even go for thin value, so I bet $150 going a little bit small here, about a quarter the size of the pot. The initial raiser calls, we show, and we win, so our little thin value bet gets us pretty much max value there. Happy with that one. In the following hand, there is a straddle on. Early position decides to make it $150. Middle position and the small blind make the call, and I find myself here in the big blind with ace queen offsuit. This is a great situation throughout the old squeeze ball here. Again, there's a straddle on. This is a big game, and it's getting even bigger now that I decide to 3-bet it to $625. Under the gun raiser, I think we're playing 6 or 7 handed at this point, comes out of nowhere and throws the old 4-ball to $1,300. I'm now sick to my stomach as the action folds back to me. Obviously, our hand's really good, and it's not the worst thing in the world to call here against what is pretty much a min click. There's a couple ways to go. I think that we can sometimes just bluff jam it in here because we're deep enough where we obviously have fold equity, but deep enough where this is also just a punt, it feels like. So, although I'm out of position and no one's ever excited about that, against a gentleman by the name of Armenian Matt, I think we'll take it to the streets. He's definitely capable of doing some funky stuff, so we can't just give him credit for ace, king, and aces plus. I think our job here is to play accordingly. So I go and do that and make the call here. We whiff as it comes jack 7-5 rainbow. At this point, I check it over to the opponent who decides to c-bet for $800. I think at this point, this is a pretty easy situation. We should just get on with the next hand. I should fold, but in real time, I believe that my opponent can either have the same hand or a hand like ace-10 suited or ace-x of hearts. Either way, I make the float here with ace-queen high, and the turn card comes a deuce of diamonds. Again, just doesn't change much. At this point, I check it over to him, and he decides to check it back. So I think we can kind of discount a lot of those wheel aces unless he's trying to realize equity. Either way, the river card comes a 9 of spades here. Doesn't change very much, to be fair. At this point, it ends up checking through. So this massive pot with ace high, we show our hand down, or at least say ace high, and Armenian man ends up showing the old ace 5 here. And they joke around and call it the clacker in this house game. So good hand to you, sir. Absolutely owned me and got max value with bottom pair. Well, as some say, I am getting my butt handed to me, but we have quite the session left in store still to come. There's a ton more hands to go over, several more hours to play, so my goal is to put myself in a position to prosper. In this following hand, I do just that by deciding to play king 3 of diamonds. But wait, hear me out. There's a straddle on in this hand to $50. The button limps here. I'm in the small blind with king 3 of diamonds. I decide to isolate. It's bad. I can't defend it. But I'm in position, or I'm out of position, excuse me, and I have a suited king here. I've been looking kind of nitty, at least that's what it feels like for my perception of myself, as I haven't been having great card distribution. I haven't been able to raise too much pre-flop. So let's take advantage of our current image. Only the limper makes a call, and we're going off to a flop with over $500 in the middle. That comes jack, queen, deuce, 2 spades, and a club. I decided to c-bet pretty small here for 175. He ends up calling, so far so bad. The turn card comes at 10 of hearts though, so nice. Our blocker, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize it's kind of more relevant now. I decided to throw out another bet of $350, allowing myself somewhere in the neighborhood of a 2x pot size river jam if I decide to do so. Luckily for both of us, it won't come down to it as our opponent ends up folding. We end up taking the pot down, which we love. Things are heading in the right direction. This is a really important part of today's video, so don't click away from it, don't click away from it. But as you guys know, in the month of October, I promised every single penny that I made from YouTube and ad revenue, I'd be giving it away, and that is coming to fruition today. As you guys know, obviously Breast Cancer Awareness Month is the month of October, and I think it's fitting that we get our donation sent over. In the month of October, although it was a little slow for us, we ended up doing $949.67 if I got the number perfect, which means we're going to go ahead and donate $950 just to make it easy. Looked at quite a few different charities, and it's going to be with the Unite for Her charity. We did a ton of research. As you guys can see on the other screens, there's like 8 tabs pulled up. It's going to help people in need, and that's the kind of the main goal of this whole thing. So the one thing I want to say is this is all thanks to you guys for sitting through those ad runs. It's because of you folks. So a massive thank you to you all. This donation is not from me to them, it's from us, and specifically you guys, to hopefully the people that we can impact in a positive manner. So thank you again to you guys. Sorry to cut today's video here, but this is something impactful and important, and I hope to do more things like this in the future where we can positively impact our communities. I know we play poker and it's such a lone wolf game, but it's kind of cool to sit back and kind of look back and try to help out where we can. So hopefully in the months to come or in the years to come, we can impact in a larger way, maybe monetarily. I'm sure we can keep doing, you know, what we can in the channel. So thank you guys once again, but otherwise let's throw it back to the video. Once again, we have a middle position limper here. I find myself on the button with Jack 9 offsuit. Not great, but look, it's close enough to being a suited connector, so much so that it's a gapper and not suited. But I decided to isolate with the button here to $125. The big blind decides to make the call, and the limper folds. We're going off to a flop that comes 9-5-3 with 2 hearts and a diamond. Flopping top pair on a board that just isn't going to hit me too often, especially as the isolator is pretty great, as I can be deceptive. I can go a lot of ways with this hand, especially because I'm in position. Our opponent ends up checking it over to me, and I decide to play a little cautiously and check it through. Last thing I want to do is get check raised on a board like this and not know what the hell to do. So we're going off to a turn card that comes as 6 of clubs here. Introduces some straights, obviously, and even some straight draws. When the action starts with our opponent, he bets 200. I'm never folding, so I call. The river card comes the 8 of clubs, putting out a 4-card straight, which is, again, not great. Our opponent decides to bet $450, and now the question becomes, how often does my opponent end up here with a 7 on the river? I don't really think it's all that often. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just don't see a ton of 7x betting the turn. I think that maybe a 7x plays better as a check raise on this board texture. And by the lead structure, I just don't see too much 7. Maybe 9-7 makes sense, a hand like that. But again, considering we got a cold call out of the straddle here from our opponent, I just don't see a whole lot of 7x in there. So I decided to throw out the old hero call for 450, and our opponent ends up saying good call as he shows 4-3 suited. End up taking that pot down. Like I said, feeling pretty good about that. Well, enough of the shenanigans. We do have quite a few more hands to go over, but the one in particular that I'm sure a lot of you guys are worrying, or not worrying, and that doesn't make any sense. The ones you guys are really here to see, and maybe have seen on Mariano's vlog already, and you can definitely see by the title of this video, is this next one. So, man, I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. Buckle the hell up. This is one of the sickest pots I've ever played in my life, and it happened to be against a friend, Mariano. Either way, in this next hand, the straddle is on. Early position limps. I decide to isolate $250. Mariano is in the cutoff directly to my left and decides to 3-bet to $750. With the action back over to me, this is where things get a little tricky. Obviously, we're playing like infinite deep or whatever. Not that deep. I think we're playing somewhere in the neighborhood of like 130 or 150 big blinds effective. So we are playing deep, but the question now becomes, I think, is this hand ever a 4-bet? And I just don't know. Maybe against somebody like Mariano, who's definitely constructing a pretty solid 3-betting range pre-flop, we can consider it, but in real time, I think calling makes the most sense, so I do that. We're going off to a flop that comes 7-deuce-deuce with the action checked over to him. He bets 450. We're not doing anything but calling here. Raising would be something that somebody in 1993 at the World Series of Poker would do. So, yeah, not going to be doing that. I end up making the call. We're going off to a turn card that comes in 9 of clubs, bringing a backdoor flush draw. We do, in fact, have the 10 of clubs. Whether that's good or bad, I have no idea. I'm not good enough at poker to know whether that's good or bad. But if anything, all I can do here, once again, is check. Our opponent decides to bet 1K. Again, I don't think I should be folding here ever. I think that if I decide to fold on this turn, I am giving too much credit to my opponent's range. I think our opponent can still have bluffs here. I am making the call here, and we're going off to a river card that comes to Jack of clubs. Probably the worst card in the deck for several reasons, but mostly because it brings in that backdoor flush draw. And my opponent, if he had a hand like maybe ace-jack suited, now improves to a pair and can honestly go from bluff-bluff to now bluff-bluff bet for value, which is, again, not great. I decided to check it over to him, and he decides to bomb it all in. So just about a pot-sized bet here. There's $8,000 in the middle, and now the question is, do I have the cojones to really make the call here? As you guys know, I am not one to shy away from a big call for many reasons, but most specifically the fact that I am a calling station. Good or bad, again, I guess that's up for debate, but in this specific moment with this specific run out, like I'm literally throwing up in my mouth right now. for many reasons. But the problem I'm having and I can't get away from is the fact that I have the 10 of clubs. Although my opponent, again, can be doing this, it actually becomes very polar. I mean, obviously because he decides to jam for the size of the pot, but the problem is my opponent is good enough to not only jam this river with a flush. I think our opponent can have aces with the ace of clubs or kings with the king of clubs. So that just puts me in a really tricky situation. When the range of hands in a polar bet situation isn't just the nuts and nothing, when our opponent is able to construct it properly, it makes this call really difficult. All of that being said, and considering I do have the 10 of clubs in my hand, I think at this specific point, I've got to give my opponent credit where credit is due. I decided to do the old tap the table, salute the gentleman, and throw my hand away. I almost never do this, but against this player that I really respect, and again, a friend, I actually asked him if I could see his hand. And he did show me, and as you guys can see from this little clip here, Mariano, the G, had ace 3 of hearts. So exactly what I put him on in that frame of hands, obviously, the polar aspect. But in real time, I had been consistently telling myself that I think my opponent has some form of wheel X. If it's ever a bluff, it'd be a wheel X that was either ace X of hearts, ace X of diamonds, or ace X of clubs. All of those suits are on the flop. That's a really, really good bluff candidate to go bet, bet, bet when you have one of those suits, for too many reasons to go over and way too many reasons to bore you guys with. At the end of the day, you just got to tip your cap off. He got the one person that's not ever folding to fold. So props to him. Good hand, brother. So by this point, our stack has dwindled down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 or 4,000. So we're stuck like 2K or 3K at this point. But who's counting? We're here to have fun. We're here to have a good time. And we're happy to be here. In this following hand, there is a straddle onto 50 bucks. Under the gun makes it 250 with about 450 behind. I decided 3-bet to 700, putting him pretty much all in effectively, looking to get everyone else out of the hand with pocket jacks. Jiggities, the last thing you want to do is misplay this bad boy, which it is, again, so easy to do so. Either way, it folds back to our opponent, who decides to make the call pretty quickly. We're running it in an all-in situation, and let's watch the video and see if we can hold against an ace-high holding.
2 times, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We'll see if I really got that. Oh damn. And, that's you. Free rolling.
Love a free roll.
Kind of me.
Well, looks like the storm is getting the hell out of here. It's going south. We're finding ourselves finally a good pot to come in our direction. Finally, a W for the kids. There's a straddle on a $50 once again here. Under the gun in the cutoff limp, I find myself on the button with pocket Kirons, pocket kings. I make it a 5x sizing of $250. The straddle and both limpers make the call, so we're going way too many ways. Again, I feel like I say that too many times here. And we're going off to a flop that comes 10, 10, 3. Well, we love board textures that are pretty decent, and this one's not that bad at all. Again, it feels like we're way ahead or way behind, but you got to bet because we can still get a ton of value from other middling pairs. So I make the value bet here for $350, a little bit on the bigger size. Both players make the call. And we're going off to a turn that comes the ace of spades. Yeah, that's bad. That's not good at all. I've got to learn how to make big folds, and we tried to make one earlier and we were wrong, but let's see what happens here. The straddle decides to throw out a bet here of $750. Under the gun calls, and I guess that's my easy way to get out of this one. I decide to fold here, but we're staying on board with this hand till we get the showdown. The river card comes at 3 of clubs, changing very little to the board texture. But our opponent for the straddle decides to just open rip it for $1,500. Under the gun decides to make the call and shows ace king. So somehow we didn't get all of it in the middle, but I guess it is what it is. I'm happy we didn't, because that would have been a really, really big pot that I would have lost if we didn't run it twice. But our other opponent ends up showing ace queen. So, well, to finish off our session, we have another big hand to go over and looking to save our night. In this next hand, there's a $50 straddle on. An early position player decides to limp, and we look down at pocket Kirons once again, back to back. We decided to isolate once again at $250, feeling like deja vu. Everything is running back and being scripted in the exact same way. But in this specific end of the story, the big blind, the straddler, and the limper all call. We're going once again way too many ways off to a flop that comes awful. Ace, queen, 10 with 2 spades out there. Well, when the action checks over to me, I can promise you one thing. I'm not very happy about the situation that has been put in front of me. Moreover, I don't even have the king of spades, so not looking very good here. It's looking fairly grim. I'm allowed to realize some equity, so I just check it back. And it seems like our pain is going to be extinguished here as we get bailed out with a miracle jack of diamonds on the turn here. A beautiful offsuit jack gives me the absolute nuts. And even better than ever, the action checks over to that initial limper who decides to just open rip in his stack here for $845. There's a very high chance that I am chopping here with another king, although there's not very many of those left. But it looks so strong when somebody open jams into 3 other opponents and I still call. Whatever I do here looks sketchy, looks sneaky, looks trappy. But I think the thing that looks the least ridiculous is just playing a little call here and allowing opponents to have flush draws to try to hit their card, or obviously look to draw out, or maybe entice them to do something ridiculous with a draw. I make the call for 845, and at this point you guys can see our lovely friend here, Mariano's beautiful face. What, those are some gorgeous nostrils, sir. Either way, the big blind luckily calls as well, so our plan seems to be coming along fairly well until the river comes a dicey one. It comes down the ace of diamonds pairing the top card, although I doubt any of our opponents here have any boats to worry about. So when our opponent checks it over to me, I think we have a pretty easy and mandatory check back. We end up seeing from the limper 8-9 here, so he had the lower end of the straight, and of course pocket kings is the effective nuts here, so we show it down and we are good. Happy to take that pot down or really save our night. All of that being said, although things didn't go perfectly in my direction, there's a lot to learn from today's session, and you guys will hear me talk about it here in the outro. So let's start over to me in the bowling alley with some close friends and see how we feel after today's session. Just finished up our game of bowling, but we've got some poker to talk about. Today's session was an absolute it was a mind bender. What Mariano did to me today was the epitome of why I think he's one of the best players. Outside of that, I feel like we made a ton of mistakes in today's game. I just get disappointed when the right play or the right opportunity is in front of me and I mess up. You make compounding errors. So I think that's one of the biggest things I've got to work up within my own game is when I come across a bridge and I have trouble crossing it. The problem is I'll have trouble crossing every other bridge that I have for the rest of the session, so I got to work on that. We were into the game for 5,800 and out for like 37, so a loss of like 2,100. Not that big considering we're playing 25, 50, 100 for this latter half. Could have been much worse, and we'll take our losses and lick our wounds. At the end of the day, it's about controlling what you can control, and I didn't think I did a great job of that. But the one thing I can control is the ability to grow past this and to like I said, talk about the errors out loud and be realistic with myself. I think once we can figure that out, we can be a dangerous player. So we'll figure it out when it comes. Either way, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Thank you guys all for supporting the videos and allowing us to make that donation. We made that donation as a collective. It was not a me. It was definitely an us thing. So massive thank you to you guys. That'll pretty much do it for a really long outro. I appreciate you guys all dearly. Stay happy, stay healthy. More importantly, guys, run good at the tables. Thank you so very much for your support. Happy holidays. Tell someone you love them. Deuce.